Hey Kev, let's follow this trail over here. This looks like there might be something waiting down there.
All right. Hey, wait a minute. Do you hear that?
Yeah, I thought it was just me. What the heck is that?
I don't know what that is. Whoa, do you smell that too?
That's unbelievable. Hey, look.
What the?
Hey, look, those branches are moving over there.
What the heck is that?
Holy cow, is that what I think it is? Look at that thing.
Oh my God.
It's a freaking Sasquatch. Welcome to the Bigfoot Terror in the Woods Sightings and Encounters podcast. I'm your host, W.J. Sheehan. Hello, everybody, and once again, thank you for joining us on what is going to be a great podcast, I guarantee it. My name is W.J. Sheehan, author of the series Bigfoot Terror in the Woods Sightings and Encounters, Volumes 1 through 8, all available at Amazon in ebook and paperback format. And also at Audible, Volumes 1 through 6, as well as one of my new Exorcist books named Diabolica. But the other Exorcist books, Full Moon and Truth and Lies, are available at Amazon in paperback and ebook as well. So, do help us out. Go out and buy a book. And now, without any further ado, let me introduce my brother and co-host, KJ Sheehan. Kev, how are you?
I'm good. How about you, Bill?
Well, I'm rocking and rolling over here, man. The heat is on and it's staying on.
Yeah, well, it's the dog days of summer.
Woo. Yeah, problem is I'm not a dog.
Almost August.
Yeah, it's been brutal, man. I mean, I don't even want to go out and mow the lawn, but, you got to do stuff.
Yeah.
So here we are. And, by the time this podcast airs, this hurricane or tropical storm Isaias is hitting Puerto Rico and heading towards the Dominican and or Florida, probably be sliding up the coast into your neighborhood.
Yeah, we're just looking at that and getting ready to batten down the hatches. Quite literally.
Yeah, it's unbelievable, man.
By the way, so this is a guaranteed podcast tonight?
I guarantee.
All right.
That's right. If you don't like it, after you listen to it, you can turn it off. That's
quite the guarantee.
Yeah. It's like if you buy a used car from me and the motor blows, you're screwed. So, my brother,
good.
I'm sure you've got something geared up for our Cryptids in the News and Other Oddities segment.
I do, Bill. Today, we're going to talk about the Minerva Monster. Are you familiar with this creature?
I have to say, I have to hear a little bit about it before I say I'm aware or not.
All right, that's fair enough. So Minerva isn't the name of the monster, like my monster Minerva, but it's a small city in northeastern Ohio. And it's about halfway between Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania, western Pennsylvania, and Cleveland in northern Ohio.
Okay.
And it looks like a cool little town. And, all the action with the Minerva Monster, the initial documentation of the action occurred in August of 1978. Okay, but going back a few years, but about this time of the year, nice hot day, hot night.
Yeah, got the Minerva Monster rustled up in the heat.
Exactly. Everybody gets a little edgy when it's hot.
It's time to go hunting for some humans.
Exactly. And, basically there's that, well, not basically, there is a documentary about this. A well-made documentary, I must say, which you may have seen, Bill. I didn't see it until I started to research this. And that documentary came out in 2015. And these days, you can view the documentary on YouTube. So I happen to watch it on YouTube. Pretty good. About an hour long.
And that's the Minerva Monster on YouTube, like key those words in?
Minerva Monster. You'll see it, documentary. I think it originally came out on DVD and stuff like that, but that's what I mean. These days you can see it right on YouTube.
Awesome.
And it's a good documentary. Like, they interview the family members that lived at this house that saw it. They interviewed the sheriff deputy, and a newspaper reporter extensively that wrote many accounts about this sighting and follow-up sightings.
Yeah, and see, all of this just, I hate to knock the individual that comes forward. I love these people. But,
Right.
Here you have a little documentary put forth, a few you would consider credible witnesses. Yeah. And, it just doesn't get any airtime. You know what I mean? But yet these people are trying to put out there, and some investigators doing his due diligence to bring the story forth. And here we are talking about it today.
Yeah, and, like I often say, this sighting back in 1978, so there was no such thing as YouTube and stuff like that, where somebody would come up with this story to try and get a bunch of hits on their YouTube channel in order to sell more advertising or something like that. I mean, this is a family living in this house, in northeastern Ohio, little town, and you'll hear that this creature starts messing with them over time.
Yeah. And in 78, Kev, right? How would you get this out there to the public?
No, just a local newspaper. And that's this reporter that's actually in the documentary.
Yeah, that's it. It would be impossible to really... You couldn't go to a local news network in 78 and get any airtime.
No.
Not gonna happen.
By the way, when these folks came forward with the story and got it in the newspaper and stuff like that, then other people came forward. And it's like, people have been seeing this thing around this area for a number of years.
Yeah, interesting how all it takes is one with a little guts. And then, some people will pile in behind them and say, I was a witness too,
And what's really interesting, Bill, is they interviewed a lot of different people that have seen this so-called Minerva Monster, and they would describe it in a very similar way. And the description's a little bit different here. So before I talk about the account, let me tell you what the sheriff said the people described that they saw.
All right.
All right. So 6 to 7 foot hairy man. So completely covered in hair.
Okay.
And 500 to 600 pounds. Many different witnesses. Now, I got good news for you, Bill. No red eyes.
Ah, no red eyes. What color were they? Blue?
So get this. So it had, in all the descriptions, it had, excuse me, a much hairier face than we normally hear about. So they said they could see the nose, but couldn't really see the mouth, even in the daytime. Just like a lot of hair on its face.
Okay. Yeah, well,
Interesting.
It can go either way. People describe hair coming in from the side, almost like in a mustache, and then down around the jawline, forming a beard. Some people say they've seen them with fur encroaching like to the eyebrows.
Right.
This is, I guess I don't want to say like a human, because humans don't. Well, look, we grow beards, right? We could grow a beard. If we didn't have razors, we'd have hairy faces.
Yep.
But
usually you have that patch, almost like a triangle from the bridge of the nose and the eyes down to the mouth, where like people talk about dark leathery skin and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And in all these descriptions, they don't talk about that.
Right.
And in some of the sketches, which I'll put up on BigfootTerrorInTheWoods.com, you'll see it looks a little bit more like Cousin It, if you remember Cousin It.
Yeah, okay.
From the Addams Family.
Can you give me an imitation of Cousin It? I was just thinking about that. He used to just do that gibberish, and he'd flip his head around. He used to wear a little derby.
My voice wasn't quite high enough, though, right?
Oh, man. Well, you did a good job.
Maybe I'll put a picture of Cousin Ed up on the website, too.
Oh, man.
But the other interesting thing, again, multiple witnesses say that when they see this creature, get this, when it's standing looking at them, it has its hands down by its waist with its thumbs facing outward and its palms facing upward.
Wow, that's weird.
So, if you do that with your hands, it's kind of like, hey, what do you want?
Yeah, it's like, what's up?
Yeah, it's definitely some kind of expression, which, again, multiple witnesses say when they see it, it looks this way.
Wow, that's interesting.
Very strange, right?
Yeah, I mean, and if a bunch of different people cite the same thing during their interview, that's kind of unusual,
Yep. So this house, so let's go back to the setting. This house is a single-family house with kind of a detached garage in rural Ohio. It's on this road that's an Interstate 30. But, if you've traveled the country multiple times, across the country multiple times like me in a vehicle, you'll be like, Interstate 30? What the heck is that? It's not really an interstate. It's one of the original interstates, but it's more like a Route 66.
Like it's been dissected or bisected.
It's a 2-lane road, running through the countryside.
Right.
So not really an interstate. But then, interestingly, behind this house is woods. Like you go up a ridge into the woods right behind the house. Like the woods comes right down. The ridge comes right down to the back. And then beyond the first part of the woods is an abandoned strip mine. Pretty strange, right?
Yeah, and also it brings me back to the Mothman.
Yes.
They had that, wasn't it a mine of some sorts up in the woods where the couple saw him?
Yeah.
Something going on with the mine,
Yep. Unlike Mothman, no, it wasn't a full moon, and they weren't digging a grave when they saw him.
Yeah. Oh, my God.
This story's kind of boring now that you mention it. But so apparently this family, this particular night in August, they called the sheriff. They never called the sheriff before. And they called because something was continuously throwing rocks at the back of the house from up on the ridge. And it turns out they had this happen before. And they've gone out and they've seen somebody, they thought it was like some crazy old man, walking around up on the ridge in the woods behind their house. But for whatever reason, this time it was like, a little more vicious, the attack with the rocks, where they were starting to get worried. It was a little more violent, and they ended up calling the sheriff.
Did they say how long they had been living there?
For years.
Oh, okay.
Years.
So it wasn't like they just moved in and 6 months
like
later.
The last 2 months. Sounds like it went on for a long time.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then one time they sight somebody on this ridge.
Multiple times they have seen this thing. And then, after this sighting, they actually saw like this large hairy creature where they got the description both at the house. And then I'll tell you, remind me if I don't tell you, about them chasing it at one point in time.
They chased it?
Yes.
Wow.
And they caught it. So this is like some of the kids there. It seems like a pretty large family of kids that grew up seeing, they called it like the man who lived in the woods behind the garage. Like they never saw the man, but somebody was always throwing rocks and stuff. And they would throw the rocks back. So it was just kind of a weird setting,
Yeah.
But what the heck? It's rural. You got this strip mine behind you. Could be, I mean, you're not thinking Bigfoot. You're thinking some crazy guy lives back there. Or maybe some kids are throwing rocks.
Yeah, mischievous person or persons.
Exactly. So this all happens over time. They call the sheriff this particular night. The sheriff comes out. And they also discover that this guard dog, German Shepherd, that they have that's chained up outside has a broken neck.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. And he's usually on a collar and a leash and has like a little tunnel that the dog dug to sleep in outside. Pretty mean guard dog that they got from a neighbor a couple of years ago. And the dog it's out of its collar and it has a broken neck. So they point that out because, the family members said it's not like the dog broke its own neck, which could happen. Not likely, but it could happen.
Now, this was part of the testimony from the sheriff?
Yes.
Of evidence that was around the house?
Rocks, the dog with the broken neck. They had footprints out around the house that they'd seen multiple times, too, that were they talk about them as being deep in nature, like in the dirt, to go correspond with something that weighed 500 or 600 pounds. Mm-hmm. They talk about the fact that there's clear toes, like human-like toes, and no claws. Yeah. So they're getting ready in case somebody says, oh, this was just a bear.
Yeah.
Like they always say.
Well, again, I stand my ground that even people who aren't like hunters per se, people who live in the woods, especially for years, you get pretty familiar with what's around you and what things look like, even if you're not trying to. Yeah. Your just powers of observation are working. And you're like, wow, look at this track over here. What do you think that is? And maybe you learn that's a deer. And then, somebody tells you, oh, this is a raccoon.
Yep.
You just pick up on it,
It's interesting, too, a little bit like, remember when we did the Hopkinsville goblins a few weeks back?
Yeah.
Where that was like aliens and UFOs. But when they called the police, if you remember, the sheriff came out and he said there was like no booze around and nobody was drinking or under the influence. This sheriff that responded to this call said the same thing in his report.
Okay, so it's something they look for.
Yeah, of course.
To trying to. I don't think they're in particular trying to discredit you. They're just doing their due diligence.
It's their job
on a call,
right? Making observations.
That's it.
What's going on?
Mm-hmm.
So they went out and they searched the next day, and they found back in the woods behind the place a 12-foot round area that looked like a bedding area for the creature.
Wow. This was behind the house or up on this ridge?
Up in the woods.
Wow.
Yeah. And the sheriff found some fur in the bedding area, and they sent it to Canton University, the Football Hall of Fame there,
right,
in Canton, Ohio, and for identification. And he reported that they could not identify what the fur was.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah. Now, I doubt they did DNA analysis or anything like that, but still, it's interesting.
Right. No, they didn't have it back then.
Right.
And really,
exactly.
Even if you do DNA today, when it comes up unknown, people still don't buy into it that it's a Bigfoot.
Right.
There's been people who've come up with many samples to date now, and it comes up, partial human, unknown, primate, odd little labelings they give these things.
Yeah.
But nobody takes a step and says, wow, maybe a Bigfoot, maybe a Sasquatch,
Agree. Now, one of the other little facts that they talked about in this story is that they said whenever the creature was around, all the crickets, locusts, and frogs would stop chirping. And there was no sound. So that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, where have we heard that before?
Exactly.
Like 1,000 times.
I was going to say 1,000 times.
Yeah.
We thought the same thing. So pretty strange. A lot of different sightings, not just by this family, which had a lot of different family members. They were all grown up at the time, too, in 1978. So apparently they grew up in this house with the parents, and then, they got their jobs, not necessarily in the same town, but, maybe an hour away or something like that. So they would live out an hour away in different directions. But on weekends, pretty consistently, they would all come home and spend time with one another and the mom and dad at the family house where this would take place.
Uh-huh.
And so, they're reliable witnesses, and you'll see them in the documentary interviewing. I'll put that up on our website, too, the link to the documentary. And it's pretty darn interesting. So happened lots over time, and then when this story got published, like I mentioned earlier, other people around the Minerva area came forward and said, I saw that like a year ago crossing the road.
Wow.
And this and that. So good interesting stuff. And then when they wrote about it, like I'll put some of the articles on the website from back in 1978. The stories, of course, were local stories to begin with, but then they got picked up even globally. And what happened in the town, it's interesting, is it ended up being a place where a lot of folks would come to hunt Bigfoot, like in a true hunting sense.
Yeah, trying to kill one.
To kill one. And they would show up apparently like on a Friday night with a truck full of guys and guns, and then with, like, one of them was described as having a killer Doberman pinscher with them. Mm-hmm. And it just got really out of control. The sheriff talks about it in the interview, where one time he was out there on his patrol after this whole thing happened, after it was written about, and like the road was partially blocked off because there were so many, what I would call like Bigfoot vigilantes out there. Yeah. Trying to kill the Bigfoot. So it's kind of disturbing a little bit. And then, of course, like, which is often the case with a lot of these sightings, the family ended up being heavily ridiculed for years afterwards. Like, oh, yeah, you're the one that had the monster throwing rocks at your house.
Yeah. This is why, another reason why, like, we need one, that a lot of people don't come forward and give you exact areas, because there's tons of people out there that would inundate properties.
Yes.
Or come and suck up every bed and breakfast in a town and start asking questions. Where can we go to see a Bigfoot around here?
Well, in this particular, in this particular area too, they talked about a lot of people showing up that were just completely drunk, and just wanting to shoot the place up. Which, that's a big difference from, hey, I'd like to get a glimpse of this creature.
Yeah. So, again, it's a reason why some people will bow out and say, listen, man, don't say nothing. Before you know it, we'll have a bunch of jerks piling into our backyard here, and we'll have a real problem, and there's some truth to that.
Yeah, so, all in all, right in this period of time, in the late 70s, there were about a dozen filed reports from 7 different witnesses who said that they saw the creature, over this period of time. So a lot of different sightings. One of the witnesses said that they drove a car when they saw it, like crossing the road. They drove a car with its headlights on closer to the creature to get a better view. And when the beast ran towards the car, so kind of charged them, the occupants ran back into the house where the creature was originally seen. And then the creature came up to the house and looked through the window at them in the house. The folks in the house took out a gun and pointed it at the creature, and it didn't flinch or even move. So that was, one of the data points that they had, where they said, I don't think this was like a person pretending to be it, because any person that was wearing some kind of suit, when they looked in the window of the house and they saw you take a gun out and point it at it, you wouldn't just stand there.
No, I wouldn't. I'd dive out of the way.
Yeah, exactly.
And in those parts, man, you don't just go running around chasing people around. Anybody could be armed. Just charging a car.
Yeah.
Boy, oh boy. And first of all, we have descriptions here.
Yeah.
6 to 7 feet tall, 500 to 600 pounds. That's a pretty healthy beast.
It's a beast. It's a big, strong beast.
Wow.
And then, one of the last points I'll make for you, Bill, and I'm interested if you've heard this before. I can't recall hearing this, but they said that the creature smelled like ammonia.
Wow.
Yeah.
That now ammonia is a powerful stench.
Yeah.
I mean, that'll put you down. You can't stay on top of that.
Right, and it's not just like stink stench. It's specific.
Yeah.
So
I mean, could ammonia be like ridiculous urine stench?
that's what I was thinking, but I don't know. It's a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah, well, any way you slice it, so many encounters of Bigfoot involve a stink.
Yeah.
And even that one hunter in Hunting Bigfoot, that show we were talking about a while ago,
Yep.
he was out in the woods that one night, and he said, "This is not a bear or an elk. I don't know what it is."
Right.
But his sniffer was working overtime that night. And although he wasn't descriptive as to what he was smelling, he knew what he wasn't smelling.
Right.
And that's the important part to me with a trained nose. You may not be able to label it, but it strikes you as being out of the ordinary.
Absolutely.
Wow. Incredible.
Cool. So that is the Minerva Monster.
Excellent, man. Well,
Yeah, it's a cool story. Cool story. And you really, again, I'll put all the links up on the website. It helps a lot to see the setting, where it was seen, and the house. Oftentimes we have to use our imagination, which is fun too. But in this case, when you look at it, you're like, oh, I get this.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
And was this house kind of rural? I mean, where they first saw it on this ridge and the rock throwing, were they kind of in the sticks?
It's a rural-looking house, but it's like a grassy lawn, like it's probably on a couple of acres.
Right.
And it's mostly grass going down to this 2-lane highway.
Okay.
In the front. So it's not like you go down a big, windy, wooded driveway to get there. You can see the road from the front porch of the house.
Yeah, well, we've had encounters, most recently that one where the dog was taken off of his chain in New Jersey.
Yeah, but the sheriff talks about the fact that along this I-30, when you're heading out to this area where Minerva is, it's called Paris Township in this part of Ohio, he said there's a lot of woods on either side of the road in various spots. So,
no doubt
pretty
about
rural,
it.
I'd say.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, there's got to be a connection to some forestation somewhere for big creatures to live.
Oh, yeah.
But it's not to say there can't be a lot of houses around either.
Yep.
They don't know. What do they know if they're getting used to being around houses like bears going into dumpsters in national parks? They don't seem to care. They're just sniffing and looking around.
Yep.
And who knows? Maybe this Bigfoot got ticked off at these people. Maybe the children make a lot of noise. Who knows why he started throwing rocks at them,
Yep.
Well, this is, I'm going to follow this. That was a great story, Kev, by the way. Now, folks, I'm always bragging to my brother on the excellence brought forth by our listeners. Kevin knows I spend a lot of time on the phone, and many of you, all listeners, I've spoken to you for 2 hours on the phone, hearing about your testimonials. And we're always getting tips from people as well. So we encourage you, contact us at BigfootTerraInTheWoods.com. Go to our contact link. If you've seen something, say something. And we appreciate all the back and forth, including the humorous pictures and different things. And Kevin posts a lot of what we get on the webpage. And in that light, a listener a week or 2 or 3 ago contacted me and said, "Hey, Bill, I don't know if you've ever read this book." And the book is called The Long Walk, The True Story of a Trek to Freedom. And it was written by a man named Slavomir Rowitz. And so I hadn't read it, but in the mail, he said to me, the guy saw a Bigfoot. Now, that gets my attention, right? So I went out and I bought a used copy. And I want to read something off the back cover of the book to you. I'll talk about it momentarily. And then I'm just going to dive right into where he writes about his sighting. Now listen to this. History is filled with people who have crossed immense distances and survived despite horrific odds. None of them, however, has achieved the extraordinary feat Rowitz has recorded. He and his companions crossed an entire continent, the Siberian Arctic, the Gobi Desert, and then the Himalaya Mountains, with nothing but an axe, a knife, and a week's worth of food. His account is so filled with despair and suffering, it is almost unreadable, but it must be read and reread. In 1941, the author and a small group of fellow prisoners escaped a Soviet labor camp. Their march out of Siberia through China, the Gobi Desert, Tibet, and over the Himalayas to British India is a remarkable statement about man's desire to be free. And so, having read that little bit to you, friends, I could read a lot more. I'm going to open up the book to page 227 to where he begins to talk about what they saw. Now, by the way, 8 men escaped from this prison camp 303, I think it was. I haven't read the book. I was kind of speed reading through it. Excuse me. I was speed reading through it, having missed the table of contents page. And I thought, well, that's odd. There's no table of contents. Well, it was there. It was the 2 pages were stuck together. And so I was kind of speed reading, looking for the part about these purported monsters the listener had told me about. And it's actually, when I got into the area, it's the second to the last chapter, and it's called Strange Creatures. So if the pages weren't stuck together, I would have been brought right to it. But here you go. Now, mind you, 8 people escaped initially. And in the end, when they finally made it through the Himalayas into northern India, occupied by the British at the time, 4 of them were left. 4 had expired. And this is what happens. In all of our wanderings through the Himalayan region, we had encountered no other creatures than man, dogs, and sheep. It was with quickening interest, therefore, that in the early stages of our descent of this mountain, Colomenos, our attention was drawn to 2 moving black specks against the snow about a quarter of a mile below us. We thought of animals and immediately of food. But as we set off down to investigate, we had no great hopes that they would await our arrival. The contours of the mountain temporarily hid them from view as we approached nearer. But when we halted on the edge of a bluff, we found they were still there, 12 feet or so below us, and at about 100 yards away. 2 points about them struck me immediately. They were enormous, and they walked on their hind legs. The picture is clear in my mind, fixed there indelibly by a solid 2 hours of observation. We just could not believe what we saw at first, so we stayed to watch. Somebody talked about dropping down to their level to get a close-up view. Zarro said, this was one of the men, they look strong enough to eat us. We stayed where we were. We weren't too sure of unknown creatures which refused to run away at the approach of men. I set myself to estimating their height on the basis of my military training for artillery observation. They could not have been much less than 8 feet tall. One was a few inches taller than the other, in the relation of the average man to the average woman. They were shuffling quietly round on a flattish shelf, which formed part of the obvious route for us to continue our descent. We thought that if we waited long enough, they would go away and leave the way clear for us. It was obvious that they had seen us, and it was equally apparent they had no fear of us. The American said that eventually he was sure we should see them drop on all fours like bears, but they never did. Their faces I could not see in detail, but the heads were squarish, and the ears must lie close to the skull, because there was no projection from the silhouette against the snow. The shoulders sloped sharply down to a powerful chest. The arms were long, and the wrists reached the level of the knees. Seen in profile, the back of the head was a straight line from the crown into the shoulders, and then he quotes, like a damn Prussian, as Palowitz put it. We decided unanimously that we were examining a type of creature of which we had no previous experience in the wild, in zoos or in literature. It would have been easy to have seen them waddle off at a distance and dismiss them as either bear or big ape of the orangutan species. At close range, they defied facile description. There was something both of the bear and the ape about their general shape, but they could not be mistaken for either. The color was a rusty kind of brown. They appeared to be covered by 2 distinct kinds of hair. The reddish hair, which gave them their characteristic color, forming a tight, close fur against the body, mingling with what were long, loose, straight hairs hanging downwards, which had a slight grayish tinge to them as the light caught them. Dangling our feet over the edge of the rock, we kept them closely under observation for about an hour. They were doing nothing but moving around slowly together, occasionally stopping to look around them like people admiring a view. Their heads turned to us now and again, but their interest in us seemed to be of the slightest. Then Zarro stood up. We can't wait all day for them to make up their minds to move. I'm going to shift them. He went off into a pantomime of arm waving, Red Indian war dancing, bawling and shrieking. The things did not even turn. Zarro scratched around and came up with a 6 pieces of ice about 1/4 inch thick. One after another, he pitched them down towards the pair, but they skimmed erratically and lost direction. One missile kicked up a little powder of snow about 20 yards from them, but if they saw it, they gave no sign. Zarro sat back down again, panting. We gave them another hour, but they seemed content to stay where they were. I got the uncomfortable feeling they were challenging us to continue our descent across their ground. I think they're laughing at us, said Zarro. Mr. Smith stood up. It occurs to me that they might have taken into their heads to come up and investigate us. It's obvious they're not afraid of us. I think we had better go while we are safe. We pushed off around the rock and directly away from them. I looked back, and the pair were standing still, arms swinging slightly as though listening intently. What they were for years, they remained a mystery to me. But since recently I have read of scientific expeditions to discover the abominable snowman of the Himalayas and studied descriptions of the creature given by native hillmen, I believe that the 5 of us that day may have met 2 of the animals. And if so, I think recent estimates of their height as about 5 feet is wrong. The creatures we saw must have been at least 7 feet. I think that in causing a deviation of our route, they brought our final disaster upon us. And it goes on. That was the last they saw of them, but it goes on to the rest of the story as it was. But, Kev, you know, this account was very much to me like Teddy Roosevelt's Wilderness Hunter, where he plugged in Bauman's account.
Yes.
And we said that why would a guy who just put together a book with all factual data suddenly throw this narrative in there that was bogus?
I'm with you. And when did this take place, Bill?
1941.
Okay.
These guys, if you read the story, they broke out of a Siberian Russian prisoner of war camp.
Okay.
8 men. They climbed the wire and escaped. They had minimal food. They're calling it a week's worth of food. Somehow they had gotten a hatchet and a knife. I didn't read the story, so I was speed reading through it, but I know a few little things. My estimate, looking at the map, is that these guys went on foot 3,000 miles, beginning in the Siberian wilderness, China, the Gobi Desert. I mean, just think about it.
Yeah, it's quite a journey.
And that's why I read the back, the little blurb off the back cover. The will of man to survive and be free.
No doubt.
And 4 of the 8 died in the process.
Well, you could only imagine how bad a prison camp is in Siberia. It's about as bad as it gets.
Yeah, it's would blow my, I don't even think I can imagine it. You know what I mean? But think about this sighting. Here they are, just about. They actually entered into northern India shortly after that. One of the last men who was to die died right then. They have this sighting of these 2 specks in the distance after they were descending the last mountain in the Himalayas that they had to deal with. They see these 2 specks, dark specks. Now, what does that remind you of, Kev? Remember that video we were examining a while ago?
Columbia.
Yeah.
Saw this dark speck down in the valley from
That's
the
right.
folks on top of the mountain.
Now, these guys had to go there. I mean, they were like, no more Himalayas, man. We're out of here. But look what's ahead of us.
Yep.
And their description of the reddish-brown fur, rust-colored, the fact that one was slightly taller than the other, and after he had been saved or come to full freedom, he makes note of the fact that he had read some of recent data about the abominable snowman.
Right.
And he comments that apparently their description that he had read said the creature was about 5 feet tall. And basically he says, you know, I beg to differ with them because what we saw was 7 or 8 feet tall.
Yeah, much bigger.
Yeah, much bigger. And just incredible, huh? The one
Very
guy
cool.
in... Now,
Awesome, Bill. Great job digging that out from a listener, and great job, listener, letting us know about it.
Now, I had never heard about this story before. And certainly this is worthy of being included in any Bigfoot narrative out there, and I have never heard this story before or of the book.
I know. Oh, yeah.
So let me just give it a plug again.
Yes.
The book is definitely worth a read. It's freaking horrific. The ordeal again and again and again that these guys went to as people were dying along the route. It's called The Long Walk, the true story of a trek to freedom. And the author's name, one of the guys in the group who escaped, Slavomir, Slavomir Rawitz, Rawicz. I'm definitely going to be partaking of this whole thing. But what an incredible Yeti account.
Fantastic.
By prisoners of war escaping, and amongst everything else they had to deal with, they have a dual Yeti sighting in the Himalayas. Mm-hmm. Just incredible, man.
Very cool.
Yep. So there you have it, Kev.
All right. Well, we got some good listener mail this week, Bill.
Awesome.
We are first going to go to Darren in Wales in the UK.
Okay.
So let's hear a little Beatles accent.
A little Wales accent? I have no idea what it would be like, but all I know is that I don't want to be there. And as far as Dool is concerned, he's getting on my nerves, that Dool. He sent us another email explaining that his real name is Daniel.
Oh.
Did you get that email, Kim?
I did. Didn't he mention throwing some lead or something? Yeah. Scattering some lead.
I'm only kidding you, Dool.
Scattering some lead. So this is from Darren, not Dool or Daniel. And he says, hello, Bill and Kev. Thank you, first off, Darren, for mentioning me. He says, first off, love the show. Your humor, with an O-U-R, so I know he really is in Wales, really brightens up the sometimes very serious world of Bigfoot. Having first heard Bill on Sasquatch Chronicles with Wes, I purchased a few of the books from Amazon. Good stuff, page after page. I'm from Wales in the UK. Not many recent sightings of the Welsh hairy man. We are a small country full of castles and legends. Keep up the good work and energy levels you both have for the subject. A question for you, Kevin. You mentioned the amount of traveling you do for your job. At least I'm adding in here, folks, I used to do before COVID-19. And he says, the places you have been is endless. What are you, an American James Bond? Shaken, not stirred.
Yeah, Bond, James Bond.
Excuse me, Miss Moneypenny, can you bring me a... It's very good. Thank you, Darren. No, someday maybe I'll talk about it, but I do travel a great deal all over the place, and it's kind of goofy. Like I could be at the Taj Mahal, as Bill will testify, on a Saturday, and be in the bottom of the Grand Canyon on Monday.
Yeah.
But lately I haven't been anywhere. Like when I was with my grown children the other day, an airplane flew over, and I was like, I remember when I used to ride on those. Now, you know,
Darren makes mention of the Welsh hairy man. Is there a Welsh hairy man, or you think he was saying that tongue-in-cheek?
I don't know. We'll have to do a little check on the Welsh hairy man.
Yeah, let's do a check on that. And Darren, get back to us and let us know if you've heard anything about the Welsh hairy man.
Yeah.
So there's nothing worse than an inconclusive email, Darren.
And meanwhile, I'll load my Walter PPK.
I'll break out the Aston Martin.
Excellent. All right, so the next email comes in from Dan in Connecticut. And he says, it's a multi-parter, so I'll go through the whole thing. He says, have either of you seen a UFO? Have you seen the recent stories coming out about the fact that the government may be about to release some evidence related to materials of an unknown type that were found as part of the physical evidence of UFOs? Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts? Dan.
Wow. Well, I have a lot of thoughts about that, Dan. Obviously, you're new to the podcast because I have had numerous UFO sightings. And I would encourage any and all of you to grab a copy of General Colonel Philip Corso's book, The Day After Roswell. That was put together back in the 80s. If you want to read some testimonial from a guy who was in the know about UFOs and what happened with the evidence, pick up Colonel Corso's book, The Day After Roswell. Give it a read over a month or two if you're not really a reader, and I think it'll blow your mind. But, yeah, I think there's some UFO disclosure going on here. And whether or not it's being done deliberately or in parcel, being doled out as though, we're being fed little pieces, I think there's really something going on here, Kev.
Yeah, no, I saw the stories. Kind of, they're a little strange because it hints that there's rumored to be significant material disclosure coming out, which I'm not quite sure why there would be hints unless it's somebody, disclosing the fact in an unauthorized way, right? Like, stay tuned, something's coming, which that certainly could be. But other than that, I don't know how. And, Bill, when I was looking at this email, I told the story, I think, on this podcast about when I saw a UFO. I've really only seen one that was very dramatic and clearly something that was not what you would normally see. And I mean, I lived in Phoenix, Arizona, folks, where, you always hear about the lights suspended over the airport. And I'm not saying there's nothing weird going on there, but being an aviation guy, I lived out there and I saw where it seemed like there was a string of lights suspended over Sky Harbor International Airport. But it turns out there, the visibility can be like 200 miles on a given night. So you're actually oftentimes looking at like 6 or 7 or 8 jumbo jets that are stacked up in the distance on final approach. And it looks like a vertical string of lights, especially if you're not used to the fact that you can see 200 miles.
Right.
But I'm not discounting everything that's seen out there. But this particular thing that I saw was back on Saturday, November 7th in 2015. And it was off the southern coast of California. I was out there on business, James Bond business.
Yes.
And I was staying at a resort called the Terranea, which people in around the LA area will know Terranea. And we were out having a beer on the cliff next to the resort, looking down towards San Diego. And we see this like ball of fire in the sky that took up 1/3 of the sky. And we saw it for like 40 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah. Like to the point where you're looking at it, it's right there. It takes up 1/3 of the sky. And you're starting to be like, is this my last night on Earth? Like what exactly is this?
Right.
And we're all Googling it like crazy, being tech folks, and no hits at all. And when I read this letter this week, I searched again on Google, and there was a CNN story from the following day. And I remember seeing this, but it was good to see it again. So on that following day, Sunday, and I'm going to put this on the website, it says, mysterious light freaks out Southern California residents. And also it freaked out some of the visitors like me.
Yeah.
And I'm going to read you the story. It's short, but it's important to hear this. So remember now, we saw it at Saturday night off one of the largest cities in the country, L.A., right next to LAX. You can see the planes landing at LAX from the Terranea Resort. And it says, panic and speculation spread Saturday night when a bright white light shot through the night skies of Southern California. Residents posted a flurry of videos on social media, together with theories of aliens or meteors. Others made panic calls to law enforcement officials, but not to worry, U.S. military officials said. It was a planned missile test. The Navy Strategic Systems Programs held a scheduled missile test flight at sea from the USS Kentucky, which is a ballistic missile submarine. The test was conducted off the coast of Southern California, the Pentagon said in a statement. So, I mean, I remember thinking when I read the story back then, but even more so today, and I'm not, Bill, you know, I'm not a conspiracy guy.
Right.
But I'm like, what the heck? Why would the U.S. military, the Pentagon, fire a ballistic missile off of a submarine on Saturday night at 8 o'clock right off the coast of one of the most populous cities in the United States and in the world, for that matter?
Right. Also in an area where there's air traffic.
Oh, yeah.
And when have you ever heard of, including the Saturn V rocket, for God's sake, the largest rocket ever launched, have heard of a plume coming off of a rocket that took up a third of the sky and lasted 40 minutes?
Yes. So, I mean, folks, ridiculous. Definitely a UFO. And there's a video that's in this story. I'm definitely going to post it. And I have video on my phone and pictures on my phone.
Yeah.
Yes. Dan, yes. Bill has seen them. I have seen them. And I'm going to show you a story about the one that I saw. And just the ridiculous explanation.
Yeah.
I mean, unless they fired it off by accident.
No, I mean, and really, if you go back into the 70s when the whole brouhaha really started to get kicked up about the Area 51, Roswell, New Mexico, that whole gig, that was what the original beef was. When the people were re-interviewed that were in that area, was saying that's not what it was. It was not a weather balloon. And the fact that the original headline that was released was saucer found in New Mexico. And then the following day it said weather balloon, correction, you know. So, yeah, really, it's just a continuum of baloney. And, Kev, we were reviewing a while back the Tic Tac information.
Oh, yeah.
Now, that Tic Tac information was released. That was footage from a fighter jet.
Absolutely. And the audio from the fighter jet, too, where the pilots are talking about it.
That's right. And they don't just release that unless they want you to take a look at it, you know. So
cool, man.
To be continued.
Yeah, we got to do maybe a UFO story or two, another one. It's been a little while. All right. So our last email comes in from Keegan. And Keegan is in Alberta, Canada.
Okay.
All right.
It was Saskatchewan where the Craven was seen.
That's correct.
Yeah, that thing, I can't get that thing out of my head, man. That was video. A vicious-looking, nasty-looking beast.
It's awesome. So, Keegan writes, I've recently found your podcast thanks to the forest floor. Yeah, big shout
Emily.
Out to the forest floor. I have to say, I'm really enjoying it. I listen to your podcast every time I'm at work, and each episode gives me both a smile on my face and chills down my spine. We should put that on our tagline, Bill. I was curious on what your opinions are on the Wendigo down here. Do you think it is a demonic entity or a physical being? I was also wondering if you've done any research into the incident that took place in Fort McMurray in the 80s when the construction workers were working on the highway and a Sasquatch was hurling rocks at the workers and howling from atop a hill looking down at them. Thanks again for the work you guys do and for reading about other people's encounters. I believe what you guys do helps give these people some closure to what they might have experienced. I thought I'd let Bill know See, Bill? Letting Bill know, not Kevin.
Yep.
That I plan on getting my license to own and use firearms by the beginning of next year. And to let him know that the first guns I'm getting are an MK4 Welby double-action 6-shot revolver and a 12-gauge with slug rounds, just in case I have an encounter that would make any person who believes these creatures are shy tree huggers pucker their butts and change their shorts. Always carry more gun than you think you're going to need, right? He says, keep on squatching and God bless. Keegan. Thanks,
Well,
Keegan.
Kev,
that's awesome.
Kev, I followed up an email with Keegan asking him if he had any links to the story he was talking about. And he sent me some link, but to another similar event. He's going to look for the other one. Okay. I forwarded that to you, by the way.
Okay. I didn't see that one yet.
But, let me give a little shout out to Emily. Emily has a podcast called The Forest Floor, and it's FLEUR. I guess that's like French, maybe. The Forest Floor. And I did a little interview with Emily. She's excellent, and I encourage you to look up her podcast, The Forest Floor.
Awesome.
Oh, Floor. And, we're always looking into these sightings, and the tips that come in from you, help us to dig around for things we're unaware of. I mean, look at this story I just read to you out of the book, The Long Walk. I had no knowledge of that. I've never even heard it spoken about on another podcast. And here, this incredible story is right there for the picking, and it was brought to my attention by one of our listeners. So, Keegan, thanks for reaching out to us. Good luck with your guns, and don't point them at anybody unless you intend to use them.
That's right. That's what they say. Don't put your finger on the trigger until you're ready to fire.
That's right.
All right, Bill. So that's it for listener mail this week. And I just want to give a shout out to everyone that's been leaving us those 5-star reviews. If you haven't left us a 5-star review, please do so. It's really important. It brings more listeners to the podcast. And by getting more listeners, it allows Bill and I to continuously increase the quality of the podcast. And a lot of you have been leaving those great reviews, and just thank you so much for taking the time to do it. If you haven't done it right now, open up the podcast player that you're listening to, iTunes or whatever, and give us a big 5 stars. Thank you very much.
Awesome. And remember, folks, as many of you are still sheltering in place with this COVID on a rampage, if you do go out into the woods and decide to do a little snooping around, always carry more gun than you think you're gonna need. Sleep tight.